Morning, y'all. I like that I can say y'all again because I'm from a little town in Maine, and as Steven said, I went to Tulane. I guess I could put this here. And I've learned to say y'all just in time in 4 years to move to New York City, where they looked at me like I was crazy. So now I feel like I'm back home in New Orleans. It's really nice hanging out here for a few days. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. As Steven said, it's a very exciting thing for Tax Lien Talk as a firm and as a brand to come back to New Orleans. Our very first Tax Lien Talk was here, right down the street. Our second Tax Lien Talk was right down that street, on Royal Street. And we've really taken this brand and tried to bring it local, because we recognize that tax liens, just like real estate, are incredibly local. And while we spent the better part of 4 or 5 years trying to tackle kind of the larger institutional marketplace, at the end of the day, when you really want to permeate an entire marketplace and empower investors like yourself and service providers like yourself to do your jobs better, to make more money for yourselves or for the people that rely on you, we really need to be specific to the states. So we're happy to be back here in Louisiana, and specifically New Orleans. There's some amazing people. If you look around the room, I'm sure that you see a lot of people that you see at the auctions, or maybe don't see at the auctions anymore. Now that many of them are online, Archon is on their way as well, and you see a lot of the service providers that you rely on day to day. And hopefully you'll meet a lot more people and ask questions. And the difference between the new state seminar Tax Lien Talk series and some of the grander kind of national ones that we've done in the past is we're here to facilitate discussions. The people that you're going to see in front of you today are very good at what they do. A lot of them invented what they do, and they're just really accessible, good professionals, particularly in the state of Louisiana. And so we want to put them up here for you to use as a resource, but more importantly for you to meet and network with. And so we've got a great lunch planned, and Trudy and Steven and the conference planning team have done a fantastic job bringing everybody together here. So we want you guys to mingle, we want you guys to network. That's part of this entire experience. And then we do have a happy hour afterwards, and we'll be taking some clients out this evening, so everybody can ask where we're going. I don't really even know yet. But so we're excited to have you here. We appreciate your support. And a good thank you to all of our sponsors who we're going to mention very soon as well. About us, BCMG is a relatively new brand in the tax lien space, although it's a conglomeration, as Steven mentioned, of 7 of the companies that I started and then kind of folded under BCMG. We do run a marketplace for tax liens, an over-the-counter marketplace. It's not technically an exchange, but it's kind of as close as it gets in our little industry. We will list this year about $1 billion worth of liens, which is by no means huge like the bond market, but as you can attest to, in the tax lien business, it's a decent amount of volume. Right now on the platform, we have listed about 200 million or so. I think it's about 170 million now. $170 million worth of liens, and not a tremendous amount of them are Louisiana tax liens, which is one of the reasons that we're here today, because we would like to start doing a lot more business in the state of Louisiana, and we would like to start empowering a lot more of the Louisiana investors to either find liquidity and sell liens that perhaps they're a little less enchanted with these days, or to acquire new liens from people that hold them, and that's kind of what we do. Before we get into the weeds with Louisiana and Orleans Parish, though, I want to take a step back, and the purpose of my presentation this morning is to talk about the country as a whole, because that's how we view the tax lien universe. This is a state a map rather, that I'm sure you're all familiar with, at least partially. And it really goes through, and I know the lighting in here isn't the best, so we will email this to all of you so you can take a look. But it goes through and breaks down the United States of America into deed states, lien states, redeemable deed states, etc. And so through all these various auctions, through Archon Information System, through Real Auction, through SRI, through all these different auction companies, or in person, as many of you have done for years, you will go ahead and acquire all of these liens. they're not a homogeneous asset class. It's not the same in every state. But it is very, very prolific across the entire United States, which is the whole point of this. Louisiana particularly, I'm not going to get into in my presentation because that's the rest of the day, and you guys know a lot more about it as a state than I do. But it's important to note that the reason that we're all here is because we're all supporting communities, right? We actually have a great partnership with Habitat for Humanity. We do a lot of builds with them. We deal mostly with the Puerto Rico chapter because that's where our headquarters is located. But we do make donations in most of the places that we go and speak to the local Habitat for Humanity chapter, both in time and in cash. And if you would like to hear more about that or participate in that, we would absolutely love for you to speak with Stephen and Trudy about that. But we're here because communities need money. We're here because communities, like businesses, have a balance sheet, right? And they need to do things like support roads, local public works. They need to support teachers and pension funds and firefighters and police officers. So a few of these slides are about how our communities spend dollars. And these are from the 2014 2014 census, rather, the U.S. 2014 census. And again, I'll send these to you so you can take a look. But it's the light purple, which is the property tax. And it is a large number. And I know it doesn't look like it's a tremendous amount of the total balance sheet, but trillions of dollars is a large number. Despite what some people may tell you on a national scale, property taxes are increasing according to the census, right? So we do see trends north in property income, and they do show growth. And overall, we get calls from national tax lien buyers that buy in 29 states and DC. We get calls from local buyers that just buy in Louisiana or just buy in Mississippi. But we do field a tremendous amount of calls because we sit in the middle of this very, very interesting industry. And the consistent thing over the past 24 months, and many of our colleagues and other service providers can attest to this, the consistent thing that we hear is, this market is absolutely going south. Yields are depressed. There's too much competition. There's too many people coming into this marketplace, right? And in some places that's absolutely the case, but there are states like Louisiana where increased competition does not necessarily mean lower yields. It can in a derivative type way that some of our speakers will speak about later, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. But the pie is not getting smaller in the long run. This is an incredibly cyclical business. Most of you here have been in liens a lot longer than I have, but I did buy my first lien about 10 years ago here in Orleans Parish, and then I've been in a number of different states since, and it's always up and down and up and down. And as interest rates rise, I think we'll see a lot of the return of the national marketplace. But it all is based on the property tax at a very base millage rate, of course. So property taxes in 24. What is the actual number? It's not in billions, right? Sorry. So basically, here's your highest property taxes, and here's your lowest property tax states, according to the census. And Louisiana actually fits not in the highest or the lowest, but right in the middle. Take a step back to talk about what it is that we're good at BCMG and Blockstrade, which is our marketplace. And the parallel that we like to draw, because most people aren't familiar with the exchanges on the debt side, the parallel that we like to draw first is to the equities market. Everybody knows the equities market, right? Big companies need to go out and raise cash to do things like expand, build factories, hire workers, do all of these various and sundry things. So how do they do this? They go out first, in the biggest way, through a public IPO, an initial public offering. Right? So the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ are two of the most notable ones. Now, New York Stock Exchange now owned by Intercontinental Exchange, of course, ICE. But that's how large companies gain access to the capital markets. That's how they raise money through equity offerings. There is another smaller marketplace that exists, and this is relatively recent over the past decade. Many of you may be familiar with this, but this is the private shares market, right? So this is for companies that don't really want to be listed on the pink sheets, and they are maybe not big enough to go IPO on the New York Stock Exchange, or maybe not even big enough to go IPO on NASDAQ, or maybe they don't want to for one various reason or another. They can empower themselves through contracts and other things to list shares in the private shares market. And we're not talking about equities today, but it's important to understand the difference between a large public marketplace that we're all familiar with. You buy it through Goldman and JP Morgan or your local brokerage house and Charles Schwab and Raymond James, trading stocks back and forth. You can do the same thing in a little less formal way with all these private companies on platforms like Second Market, who was one of the companies we actually almost sold our first marketplace to, on Shares Post, which is now about 5% owned by NASDAQ. So these interesting, esoteric, different marketplaces for equity. The debt market is no different, right? Tax liens are debt. Tax liens are receivables. We do not consider tax liens securities, of course, but there is a formalized securities market which is enormous and massively eclipses the equities market, right? So bonds.com, the ERSA, and a number of different other companies really dominate the debt marketplace on a national level, right? So people that issue bonds on the corporate side, people that issue bonds, or communities that issue bonds on the municipal side, go to these marketplaces to, again, access the capital markets. Just like that, there is a smaller subset, right, that sells tax liens. And so I show you these parallels so that you understand that in the way that Second Market and Shares Post and a number of these other platforms enable investors and enable sellers of debt to access capital markets, we do the same thing. And there's a couple marketplaces that do this as well. It's not just BlockTrade. Lumentum is one of the competitors of BlockTrade as well that trades in the state of Florida. And we all really band together to provide liquidity in the tax lien marketplace in one way or another. So we'll skip over some of the global capital market stuff because we talked about the local communities before. But again, tax liens are one way in which local governments, whether it's municipal, whether it's parish in the state of Louisiana, whether it's county in many of the other states that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, access cash and free up cash on their balance sheet that they otherwise would not be able to. And as credit ratings for these municipalities go into the toilet, I mean, Chicago's rumored to go bankrupt. We've already seen the bankruptcy of very public cities like Detroit, right, where we're actually going up and trying to actively reinvigorate the property tax lien market, along with the National Tax Lien Association. But there's also been a number of very, very quiet, not so public defaults of communities. And it's very interesting to me, at least during my 8 years on Wall Street, when people say communities don't default, right? Community bonds can't default. And to that, these days, I just give a very interesting, glaring public example. I live in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico now, and if anybody's read the Wall Street Journal at any point over the last 24 months, or any paper over the last 24 months, you can see that communities can default. And there are very, very interesting examples, though, of communities that manage their debt and manage these defaults in a fiscally responsible way. But what we like to tell a lot of these communities, because we have an entire investment banking division now at BCMG, is we go to these communities and try to help them understand the value of property tax liens. So we're trying to grow your pie, just like you're trying to grow your piece of the pie in your particular jurisdictions. So we encourage communities to use tax liens to access the capital markets. This is a little bit of a circle graph to show you where tax liens fit on the broader scale of things. We're kind of small, but you all know that. And BCMG and BlockTrade and Lienalytics and LienClear and all of our different companies have really made an interesting splash in a small market. We like being big fish in a little pond. we like niche industries, and we like where we can all fly under the radar. And most of our clients really agree, probably with the exception of a couple of the larger publicly traded companies. But there's all kinds of debt out there, right? Asset-backed securities that you've read about over and over, mortgage-backed securities, corporate debt, treasuries, which are by and large the largest thing in the largest form of debt in the United States of America. And then we've got our little tax lien sector here, but it's an incredibly important piece of the community balance sheet. The National Tax Lien Association puts it right around, where are we, 2014. So in the primary market in 2014, there was probably about $9 billion, according to the National Tax Lien Association, dollars worth of property tax liens issued across the whole United States. Every state puts liens on property, obviously, right? But not every state sells those liens. In 29 states and DC, from the first map that I showed you, they actually sell these liens in one form or another to the tune of about $9 billion last year. But the NTLA also estimates that it's probably going to be decreasing to $7 billion this year. Again, cyclical, it'll come back up. Conversely, and probably logically so, if you really sit and think about economics, the secondary market is a very growing business. In 2014, between us and now the only other competitor in the space, we bought one of the other ones and another one went out of business. But the secondary market last year was really only about $250 million, which is not a big number. And we traded mostly in about 8 states. We traded in 14 fairly consistently, but all the volume was really in about 8 states. One of those states was not Louisiana, by the way. 2015, we estimated at the beginning of this year that it was going to be at about 1.75 of $1 billion, which is a pretty sizable jump. Right now, we're kind of revising those estimates down a little bit. The second quarter was relatively slow in listing in the secondary. We think it's probably going to be about 1.2 to 1.5 billion this year between all the different market players. So again, this is not a $1 trillion debt marketplace, but it's an important way to access the capital markets, and Louisiana is a good chunk of that. So why do secondary markets exist? Why can't we just go to Archon and buy tax liens in whichever parish we want or whichever parishes we want, or go down the streets of Alabama and Mississippi and buy there? Why can't we just be happy with that as tax lien professionals? Well, you can, and many people have for over a century in this country. Not in this state for over a century, but in some places over a century, people have been buying tax liens here. But there's always been this desire for a secondary market, and many of you have probably conducted secondary market activities, even if you haven't engaged a broker like us or an exchange like ours. You've probably done it yourself. Has anybody ever assigned a tax lien certificate to somebody else or to a homeowner? Of course, right? I mean, that's a secondary market trading activity. And the difference between primary and secondary is very, very simple. Primary is issuance, right? Direct from the community to the investor. Secondary is anything after that. Investor to investor, investor to homeowner. Anytime that these liens, whether they're physical or book entry, trade hands, that's a secondary market transaction. So why does that even matter? Well, it's pretty important in the grand scheme of things. It benefits issuers, so it benefits all the communities that you're supporting when you go to give them your money in the primary marketplace, right? Helps them to raise capital, helps support infrastructure, helps them to fund all kinds of different things. It benefits the buyers, right? You need more liens. I hear this all the time. My clients call me all the time. I need more liens. I need more liens here. I need more liens that fit this profile, and I don't want to pay anything for them, of course, is what they tell me. They provide unique investments for people, because when you buy something in the secondary market, by definition, it already exists, right? Your other counterparty, whoever's selling it to you, has already purchased it from the parish. They own it. You know what the collateral is. You know what the interest rate is. You know what the ownership percentage is in a place like Louisiana. And you understand the piece of paper, right? And it takes a lot of the ambiguity out of going to an auction. Many of you may have had the experience of going to an auction thinking you're going to place $1 million or $200,000 at the auction, and you come away with 2 liens very, very disappointed, right? That is a common common phenomenon, especially these days across the entire United States, not just in Louisiana. And so in the secondary market, you know what you're getting, you know it's available, and there's not that ambiguity as long as you're willing to pay the price that the seller wants for it. The second thing is that there's objective data. There's a tremendous amount of data providers out there, right? Most of which we partner with, and we do have a data company ourselves, that can provide better information on these liens, right, in a more timely fashion. You're a little rushed when you go to the primary market auctions at times, especially if you go to multiple of them. You know, the county or the parish doesn't put out the information a tremendous amount of time ahead of the auction. So it's often really difficult to go do inspections on every single property. It's often very difficult to break it down at the county or the parish level and pull all the data that you need. On the secondary market, people do that for you. The service providers do that for you. So it's a little bit easier to understand the asset that you're buying. And most important for our buyers is immediate availability. I need to fill my credit line now, or I need to invest here now, or I have a brand new investor and I need to invest now, and I can't sit around and wait for next year's auction season, and I'm not comfortable investing outside of a state that I know well, so I can buy product in that state on the secondary market. So these are just some reasons that as a purchaser, secondary markets overall are very beneficial and accretive to the industry. And then of course to the sellers, I mean, it really benefits the sellers tremendously. They need liquidity. Everybody needs to raise cash every once in a while, right? We certainly do at BCMG. I don't know any firm that I've ever met or any municipality that doesn't need money at some point. And this is a perfect way to manage liquidity, right? Or when something, an asset in this case, a tax lien, no longer fits your investment parameters, right? You want yield, this thing's getting a little long in the tooth and you don't want to get the property, sell the lien to somebody that loves property. There's plenty of people in this room that would absolutely love to buy an aged tax lien and work it out or foreclose or do what they need to do in that particular instance because that's what they do. That's their investment. That's their investment niche. And then for the sellers, we also, at least on our marketplace, provide a lot of guidance and analysis as to where these things will trade. Right? We will give you data. We will give you historicals. We'll say, look, pools like this have typically traded somewhere in this this arena or for this price, et cetera. So those are some of the benefits of the secondary marketplace. And so how did we get to where we are as an entire industry today? It's interesting to think back and to talk to many of the people that have been so incredibly important to our business about all the great stories about the primary market auctions when everybody was, we were just talking this morning, who was talking this morning? Michael, you and I were just talking this morning about fistfights in the elevators in Chicago and Cook County auctions and all kinds of fun, crazy stories. But technology, including many of the sponsors that we have, like Archon Information Systems, has really helped this industry. And some people, especially in the tax lien business, are very scared of technology, right? Because they don't want increased competition. And many of my colleagues and I would argue that it empowers, investors. It really does not, it is not negatively impacting the business for a ton of reasons. Brian Danos from Archon will have some thoughts on that this afternoon when he speaks to you about the internet auctions and the parishes here. But if we look at liens over history at a point in time, back in the earlier days, 1900s to all the way up to the early 80s, and these time frames, by the way, are very very flexible because every local market is incredibly different, and the national market, you can't pin down an exact year when these tectonic shifts took place. But there were very localized small buyers across the entire United States. People in the community helped people in the community. They bought tax liens. That's what they did. In the mid 80s through 2000, large banks came in. Everybody knows some of the large banks that came in down here in Louisiana. Some people are happy about that. Some people are not happy about that. We're happy to talk about it. That's what we're here to do. But large banks and wirehouses back then, like Lehman Brothers, like Bear Stearns, like Capital Asset Research that some of you guys know, they came into the tax lien marketplace with arguably a much lower cost of funds and changed the investing landscape very, very much for local buyers. Most people were not that happy about that. That's not great for us either, by the way, so we weren't happy about that. Then, you know, as you get into the early 2000s, 2000 to 2010, you really are seeing that through technology, through a lot of these different advances in the marketplace, through better data, through more collaboration and communication, you see the emergence of middle market players, right? So small funds with a good amount of equity, good family offices, you know, good opportunistic funds, little sleeves within other hedge funds. These guys just kind of poking around in the business, or people that know the business incredibly well, that we would consider good, solid middle market players. They've become very, very empowered in the property tax lien marketplace because a lot of the big banks left. They said, too much headline risk. They said, we can't do this anymore. They said, this is a lot of work, which we all know, and they don't like to work. We saw a massive outflow of money from firms like JP Morgan, right? The last tail of the JP Morgan portfolio, and JP Morgan, for those of you that don't know, through the Bear Stearns, not really acquisition, through the Bear Stearns thing, we'll just call it a thing for now. They acquired Plymouth Expand, right, which was one of the largest purchasers of tax liens of all time. So JP Morgan just exited their final portfolio to Propel, another very large company which used to buy tax loans in Texas and is now owned by Encore Capital, one of the biggest publicly traded debt firms in the marketplace. So they all just kind of, you know, shuffling chairs around. But middle market funds, though, said, look, this is great. We can go borrow money. You know, Capital One, who's been incredibly supportive of our business overall on the BCMG level and of the industry, came in and said, you know, we're going to do this lending thing the same way that SunTrust Bank used to, or the way that Wells Fargo still continues to, right? We're going to go ahead and empower these people that prove that they have an ability to buy and sell and manage tax lien funds appropriately. We're going to give them some leverage. And the more comfortable that firms like Capital One got with the property tax lien space, the more interesting it became, because the more comfortable a bank gets, the more they're going to lend you, right? So their advance rates go up, depending on the credit environment. Their interest rates go down, and things start getting really, really interesting for you guys. So so what we saw in 2000 and 2010 was this emergence of this middle market tax lien person, or a middle market tax lien fund, which was really cool for us because that's where all our business came from. And that's when I started my first fund, and knew absolutely nothing about what I was doing. But you see all of these interesting people that know their community really well, or know a small group of states really, really well, and they're empowered to run these tax lien funds. Then, when you get a bunch of smaller players, as opposed to a few big players and then a couple local people, what happens? People need to sell. People need liquidity. People realize that there is a big need for a marketplace. I don't know if any of you remember the 1980s municipal bond marketplace. There was no market for muni bonds, ever, right? You couldn't trade a municipal bond. People looked at you sideways when you said, I want to sell a municipal bond. They're like, but why would you sell a 30-year bond? You bought it to hold for 30 years. I mean, that's the only reason you'd possibly buy one, right? And now, I mean, think about how ridiculous of a statement that is these days, right? You don't buy a 30-year bond to hold it for 30 years. You just don't do it. I'm sure there is a subset of the investing public that does, but you ladder bond portfolios. You know that you can call your broker at any one of the wirehouses and they can sell the bond. Why? Because there's a marketplace for bonds, because there's willing buyers, because people have developed clearing mechanisms. Some of the largest companies on the planet, DTC, the Depository Trading Clearing Corporation, most of you have probably never even heard of that. Yeah, it runs all of the back end paper back and forth for every bond transaction, well, them and Euroclear, that ever happens, right? There's all these service providers that come together to empower investors to trade municipal bonds. We look at this as a much smaller, but equally as important version of that, right? So that just happened a lot earlier than it did in the tax lien business. But You saw the emergence in 2010 of really the first secondary market for tax liens. Not to say it wasn't tried before. I'm sure people that have been in this business much longer than I have that are in this room have seen secondary markets tried to develop before. And it's hard. I know, it's very, very hard to get, at least on a national level, to get a secondary market off the ground. But we did it with GFI Group in 2010. It was painful. Our volume was very, very low in the beginning. There were a lot of mistakes made. There were a lot of things that we needed to work out. But over the 3 years that I ran the tax receivables division with GFI, which just got bought by BGC, by the way, we learned some things. And we developed a marketplace. And people realized that a marketplace is not a scary thing, right, that ruins my business. A marketplace is something that, as an investor, empowers me to either buy or sell. And we started getting a lot more. We started getting a lot more traction. So, kind of see the parallel in the municipal bond market. So, and then 2012, I actually bought the division and turned it into blocks trade, which is now the largest secondary market. And then in 2014, as Stephen mentioned before, we started consolidating some of these companies and moving them under another umbrella, but not just BCMG. Talking about too much about Howard Lutnick's company. Not just BCMG, we're seeing consolidation in the marketplace overall. I mentioned before Propel, right? So Propel was a huge firm that got bought by Encore for $186 million, right? It's a pretty big number in the tax lien marketplace. But you're seeing funds like the JP Morgan portfolio, or even a lot of these middle market portfolios consolidating. People are losing credit lines, the yields just aren't there, or they ran this business for 3-4 years, they don't want to do it anymore. There's massive consolidation over the last 24 months in the tax lien business. And what does that mean for you? Well, it means a lot of opportunity. A lot of liens for sale, a lot of companies for sale, a lot of opportunities to partner with people, a lot of opportunities for dislocation in the marketplace, all these fun buzzwords that really just mean more money for people that are smart enough to take advantage of them, right? And so consolidation in the marketplace has been the most recent trend. And then Access Terminal, which we'll talk about very briefly, is kind of our little plug at consolidation in the marketplace, because we've realized at BCMG that this is too small of a marketplace to kind of like have sharp elbows and say, this is my little ball, I want to go play in the corner with this. This is not a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace. We can't do that, right? There are other service providers that have been wonderfully helpful to our success, and that we've really played into their success as well. And we want everybody to be able to play nice in the sandbox together and to empower each other, at least on the service provider side. And so Access Terminal is our answer to that. I guess I was supposed to go like this. Sorry. There we go. So Access Terminal is our answer to that. So here's all the different people, and everybody in this room fits into one of these buckets, I believe. And if you don't, let me know, because we need to add more buckets. But these are all the different players in the tax lien marketplace, right? You're an auction provider. And I said we're going to hear from Archon later. You're a seller of tax liens. Everybody here that owns them could potentially be a seller. You're a buyer. Most people here are buyers of tax liens. You're a broker, right? Like Blocks Trade. You're an issuer, like one of the parishes. You're a banker. And what I mean by this one is you're an investment banker that goes to the parish and convinces them to sell liens, right? Or convinces them to sell municipal bonds. And if you don't have an appreciation for that, I can tell you some crazy stories about just how difficult that is. You're a marketplace, you're a data provider, you're a market maker, which we can talk more about if anybody has questions, or you're a clearing agent, right? You help get the paper from one person to another in one way or another. And of course, there's attorneys and there's other service providers that fit into here as well. But in a marketplace, these are kind of the players. And in an OTC marketplace anywhere, this is how it works. Sometimes the arrows are a little bit different and the players shuffle around a little bit because of the idiosyncrasies of different marketplaces. But this is how it works in any market, right? On the top, you've got your listing. You have a seller. He goes to a broker. The broker goes to a data firm and says, okay, here, I need all the data on this. Comes back, here's my listing. The listing goes to the marketplace, right? Pretty simple. There's a lot more that goes into it than you think. Then there's the bidding, right? There's the buyers. So the buyer comes to the broker. the same broker or a different broker, right? In a true marketplace, there's multiple brokers. The broker goes to the seller. The seller says, I want this. The buyer says, I want this. Everybody argues for a bit and negotiates, just like in a bond market, just like in any other OTC market. And if the broker can get the buyer and the seller to agree, great, wonderful, we have a trade, paper swaps hands, everybody's happy, we can skip off into the sunset. If we can't get the parties to agree, we have what's called spread. And that's what ruins marketplaces. It's why marketplaces don't succeed. I don't know if anybody's heard of like the rare coins marketplace or the stamps marketplace or the marketplace for wines. Starting a marketplace for something that doesn't have a marketplace is not a genius new concept. I mean, we don't think that we're geniuses. I mean, this is not a new thing here, guys. Everybody's thought of this. It's making it work. The beauty and the art is in taking a spread where everybody in this room would sell for 500% of what you bought it for, of course, tomorrow, right? Or whatever, pick your number. Maybe it's not 500%. But there is a price at which you would sell anything. I'm a firm believer in capital markets, right? There's a price for everything. And then there's a price that you would buy everything, a penny, right? You'd probably buy most tax liens. Not some of them I've seen, but most tax liens for a penny. Absolutely. That is a very wide spread. That trade will never get done, right? So throwing a bunch of stuff on a screen does not make a marketplace. Coming up with an idea that says, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had an exchange for tax liens, like I did in a bar napkin in 2006, does not make a marketplace. What makes a marketplace is network effects. What makes a marketplace is narrowing of spread. What makes a marketplace is buyers and sellers and getting people to agree and get along. Well, not always get along, but getting people to agree and narrowing that spread. And so what's crucial in understanding the history of tax liens is that, yes, of course, there's always been a marketplace, right? You could always go to JP Morgan, and before JP Morgan, to Bear Stearns, and before Bear Stearns to Plymouth Expand back when it was former Governor Jim Florio's company. You could always go to them when you were in trouble. Right? Of course. And they'd be like, great, 20 cents on the dollar. Take it or leave it. Is that a marketplace? No, absolutely not. That is them getting liens at fire sale prices. And they're great clients of ours, and I love those guys. But they, that is not a true marketplace. Right? A marketplace is where people can trade at a fair market value, and where you can go and achieve liquidity on the buy or the sell side. And so one of the things that we've realized is that when we threw a bunch of liens up on a screen, the Dart screen that Stephen said before, back in 2010, the spreads were wide. Buyers and sellers just didn't agree on anything. And it was really, really hard to do our jobs. And data helped, and relationships helped, and all these different stories we can tell you at the happy hour helped. But it was difficult. The first trade that I did was a New Jersey piece of paper or portfolio, right? A small portfolio, it's like $500,000, Jersey piece of a portfolio, and the spread was 30 by 70, right? So for people that understand the bond market, so 30% is, we measure everything in terms of redemptive value, right? So 30% of what it was worth today was what the person wanted to buy for, and 70% of what it was worth today, you would get if it paid off, is what the seller wanted to sell for. That is what we call, in any logical marketplace, an out trade, or as most people would call, a waste of time. And so that's what you're dealing with, though, right? 40 points, that's insane. That is a crazy spread, right? Nobody would even look at that twice. But that's what we were battling with. And we took that trade, and you helped people understand, that this makes sense and this makes sense. And that's all we do as brokers on our brokerage desk. That's all we do, is help people try to meet in the middle, right? And just narrow those spreads. And we got that trade done. And that's when a lot of people in the marketplace woke up and said, oh, this makes sense. There is value in a marketplace. There's value in an ability to execute at a price, right? I don't have to fire sell everything as a seller, and I don't have to overpay or feel like I'm getting, bent over a barrel as a buyer, right? And so that's when things started to pick up. And we listed over our first 18 months, we listed over $1 billion at GFI. We didn't trade it because of a lot of spreads, but we traded over $100 million that first year. Then recently, we've introduced this concept of market making. And this has been a concept now for about 18 months. And this is when marketplaces really take off. And this is one of the reasons that that graph you saw before goes from 250 million to 1.5 or 1.75 billion dollars, is because you need a buyer of last resort. That's why the New York Stock Exchange works. Well, a lot of reasons, but that's why all of the public debt markets work, right? If no one else is willing to buy, you need somebody that steps up and says, I will do so. And here's the price at which I'm willing to do so, right? This is economics 101. This is markets 101. You have to have that, because if not, you list $1 billion and you trade a tenth of it. If not, you guys get really, really frustrated with me and with everybody else and with each other, because nobody could really seem to agree on anything. So we need to have a standard, a bottom line for that. So BCMG introduced this concept of market making, and it's really, really helped volume tremendously in the marketplace. You can always go to the market and achieve a fair market value if you're willing to wait the requisite amount of time to market your stuff in a marketplace with a good broker. Or you can take a market making bid if you need liquidity. So again, the introduction of this concept a year and a half ago was something that really, really changed our clients' businesses and really has helped flow a lot in this. And we feel has been very, very positive to the industry overall. And it's a pretty important thing. So where are we going now? So all players, all of this over-the-counter process in one portal. Now we want to go to the next step, right? So we gather all the data, gather all the players, have people understand that technology in marketplace is not a scary thing. It helps everybody. Okay, great. Now we're doing trades. We've done a lot of trades. We've listed several $1 billion worth of liens. We have over 400 institutional clients. Great, that's wonderful. Now we got to put everybody together in one place, and we have to understand that sometimes people don't want to use Blockstrate as a broker. Sometimes people want to use Lumentum as a broker. Sometimes people don't want to use Leanalytics as data. Sometimes people want to use Tax Sale Resources as data or Lumentum data, right? And that's okay, right? If you try to run an empire of just like, you are the only brand, I think that you fail fairly miserably if we look at history. So what we want to do instead is say the marketplace is not enormous. We are happy to compete in a competitive marketplace. So we'll throw our brands up there, the data brands, the brokerage brands, all those brands. All of our, our partners and our friends in this business, they all throw their brands up there. Let's all compete in one place, but let's empower our clients. And this is becoming really, really important because spreads are going away, right? Anybody that is in this room that's a service provider has probably heard in the last year, you're too expensive, right? And it's not necessarily that you're not adding enough value to your clients. It's because your clients aren't making as much money on what they're doing, right? And that's really hard for you, right? We hear that sometimes, and it's tough. So we figure if we can empower other service providers to keep their margins so that they can keep their doors open and have everything going very well, and we can empower ourselves to do the same, right? And we can empower our clients to still make the same amount of money, that's great. And we do it through the introduction of technology, right? And so we're happy to show you this now or later or schedule a demo, whatever it is. And I know this is a terrible way to look at it because our screen is black like the Bloomberg screen. But essentially, the access terminal allows you to go in, select your state, select your auction, select your service providers. You can get different data feeds, et cetera, if you buy them off the terminal now and hopefully eventually on the terminal. You can filter all the auction results. You can look through everything, choose your liens. It's very similar to the due diligence process that you do now. It's just much more streamlined. And your information persists across time is the big thing, right? You know what you thought about a property 5 years ago. Everything has a standard lien ID across the entire United States, kind of like a CUSIP for a bond. There's all kinds of interesting things that go into the back end of this that we've been working on for a couple years. You research your parcels one by one so you can see photos. You can order drive-by photos from various different providers. You can see all the information direct from the county. You can add your own research. You can add tags. Right now, you can export in all the different list formats, so like the Archon listing format, so that you can upload your bids right to the Archon platform, or the Real Auction listing format, or the SRI, or the Grant Street format. Eventually, we would like to plug it directly into the auction platform so you can bid there. Of course, you can buy and sell in the secondary market. through right now just through BlockTrade, but hopefully through other brokers in the very near future. And you can transfer liens, right? Which is the part that nobody ever wants to talk about, but is the part that if you can't transfer liens, you can't really do anything. So you get them from the seller to the buyer. So you can do all these things on this platform. But at the end of the day, the point is this. We've gone through an incredible transformation, an incredible waking up in the property tax lien business, especially over the last decade. And we're fortunate to have been at the forefront of some of it. We feel really lucky to have a lot of partners and a lot of people that have blazed the trail ahead of us and have empowered us and some other people in the marketplace to really take this to the next level. But we think that this is an exciting asset class that people should not complain about this year because yields aren't as great or that volume's down, et cetera. We think that this is an exciting asset class that I personally have dedicated the last 6 years of my life to, and a lot of you probably much more than that. But it's an amazing place to be. It's very unique. It's incredibly esoteric, but we can all grow this pie together, right? And we're looking at new jurisdictions. We're looking at increasing volume in jurisdictions now. We're looking at introducing technology and different partners and different data and different methodologies and market making to try to help you guys, give you the tools to grow your business. And if you don't want to grow your business and you want to keep it the same, that's great too. We can help you there as well. But a lot of people want to be empowered to grow their business, and there just hasn't been the same support as other asset classes we've found in the past. So with that, that's my little overview of liens as a whole, all the different markets, all the different market players. Happy to field any questions. I think we're right on time. So, questions from anybody? Secondary market, volume, players, anything? We do not provide leverage directly right now. We have the question, was, do you provide any leverage with BlockTrade? BlockTrade is just our broker, right? We do have a brand. It's called Lien Lend. It's not a very well-known brand yet. We don't advertise the brand, and it is a private debt marketplace for property tax liens. We were just talking about this before. Right now, we started Lien Lend as a referral program to people like Lori Mitchell's group at Capital One, to the Wells Fargo guys, to all the different places that provide what we now call kind of the standard property tax lien loan, right? Unfortunately, for reasons that you're going to hear this afternoon from Josh Bullock from Capital One, none of those banks lend in the state of Louisiana, which is a point of frustration for me, and I'm sure even more of a point of frustration for you. There are some local banks that we have been able to work with that do provide leverage, but Josh is going to walk you through exactly how we together as a room this afternoon, we probably can't do it this afternoon. He'll walk you through it this afternoon. Can try to get people to lend in Louisiana. But Lien Lend provides referrals right now. We do have a small loan book. We don't do anything over $2-3 million right now, and our advance rates are not as aggressive, and it's really more of a test product. But I'm happy to talk to you offline about it. But yes, we do lending. It's very, very small with the intention to grow larger. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Can we discuss our market maker program? The market making program is, let's talk about what a market maker is as well. A market maker is somebody that is either a buyer or a seller of last resort, right? Everybody's familiar with the old photos, or maybe he's even been down to the old pits at the New York Stock Exchange, right? That now is all for show, right? So you had a booth in the middle of this massive, massive building in the middle of Wall Street, and it's just so cool. I wish I was there. And you have these specialists running back and forth and tickets flying around, right? But you had people that needed to make markets, literally make markets, right? So you had a subset of stocks, right? So just say Microsoft or Apple, right? You were the market maker for those stocks. And what did that mean to the marketplace? That meant that no matter what, come hell or high water, come anything else, I was required to make a market. I had to give you a buy price, I had to give you a sell price. You didn't tell me what it had to be, right? Because that's the market maker's job, but I had to be liquidity. So if everybody in this room wanted to sell Microsoft today, in a logical market, nobody'd be able to, right? Because everybody's sellers, there's no buyer. The market maker has to stand there and be that buyer for that stuff. It's a little different in tax liens because every lien is unique and we have to group things, et cetera. But that's the market making concept, and the converse is true. So it exists in any marketplace. It didn't exist in tax liens for a long time. Our market making concept is a little different. So we do not guarantee volume, but what we do is we do provide prices at listing for sellers that want them or need them. So a normal listing process on any marketplace might look like this. Seller calls up, a broker on the phone, or calls up his lawyer on the phone. The lawyer calls up the broker. Very, very common daisy chain of events. And they say, look, we're interested in listing our product for sale. Great. We want 10 times more than the marketplace will ever pay for it. Awesome, great. That's usually how the first phone call goes. and then people become a little more reasonable. But during this listing process, we run analytics, we run historicals, we run all these things, and it's a very consultative thing as a broker. And then we show it to our desk on the trading side, the separate desks on the trading side, and they say, okay, based on the profile of this, and based on what we think in the marketplace this is, we would be willing to offer this if nobody else does. And so we will present that bid to the seller as such. And then the brokers, if the seller wants to take the bid, they can do that too. But then the broker goes out in the marketplace and tries to achieve best execution is what they call it, but to get the best price for the product. But if at any point in time the seller wants to sell for that market making price, they're able to do so. It's not really the way that market makers work in like huge marketplaces, but there's no such thing as 5,000 shares of Microsoft or 400,000 shares of Apple in our product. Every lien, as you're well aware, is unique. So we have to kind of change it a little bit, but we do think that just like most of the other things that we've done over the course of the last 7 years, there will be other people that market make, right? And we hope there's other people that market make with us and help add liquidity to this. But we just got to show people how it's done first, right? So that's the program. It's really it's a seller of last, or it's a buyer of last resort type program right now, which is how most of them start. And
the market maker and the broker are basically owned by the same entity?
Yeah, but there's a separation. Yeah, and it's the prices are all transparent pricing. Anybody else?
You mentioned the private shares market.
Yes.
Secondary market shares. What size companies actually go into those markets?
The private shares marketplaces? I am certainly not an expert on them, so I really couldn't delve into it too much. But it's going to be anything that doesn't meet the NASDAQ probably is the lowest barrier to entry for public marketplaces, for IPOs. So it's going to be anything that doesn't meet that. I don't know what the requirements are for NASDAQ. It's usually a graph where it's like you have to meet this or this capitalization or this EBITDA for the last 5 years or something. So I don't know. Barry is a good friend of ours at Second Market, and he could probably explain a lot better. He's the CEO of Second Market. He could explain that a lot better to you. But it's smaller companies.
The spreads vary.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the spreads vary a lot, and based on a tremendous amount of factors. You're looking at just so many different variables. Some of the biggest variables for spreads being really wide are time of year, right? So the primary market is the place that still most people want to buy liens. We have a handful of clients that just buy in the secondary market, and that's great. We feel like we've done a decent job promoting it because there's some people that buy just in the secondary market, but most of our guys they buy in the primary and they supplement their primary market purchases with secondary market activity, and that's fine. That's okay. But what that means is we're always kind of second to everybody else, right? So if there's all Louisiana auctions going on, there's not a lot of Louisiana secondary market activity going on, right? So it's kind of counter-cyclical. And then for some of the bigger guys, it doesn't matter. So capital constraint is another thing, right? But one of the biggest things that affects spreads these days is lending, right? Everybody knows we can make more money using somebody else's money than with our own, as long as somebody else's money is not more expensive than the return we're getting on whatever we're buying, right? That's leverage. And that's the lien lend product we talked about. So what happens is when you get banks like Capital One, like Wells Fargo, like a lot of the other regional banks to come in and tell you we're lending in the market, here are the criteria upon which we will advance you money, what you create is this middle market, right, of funds from the slide many back, that all kind of have the same buying criteria, right? So even though you don't have one giant fund, you do have a bunch of people running around looking at the same liens, because the reality is this. If I have $1 and Capital One will give me $8 if I buy a single-family residential house, lien on a single-family residential house, but they will give me no dollars, right? I have to use my own dollar if I buy a commercial lien, right? Nobody's going to go after the commercial lien because I can buy 8 times more of the single-family residential liens, right? And so that's a phenomenon that you see exacerbated in the marketplace. So that widens spreads, to answer his question, it widens spreads on anything that's not in kind of the agreed upon Capital One box. Another thing that widens spreads these days is these securitizations, which is not great for any of you guys necessarily. Great for some of our colleagues, and we wish them well with it. It's not great for our business either, because it just sucks product out of the market, right? So these huge firms that are going and buying up all this paper, dumping it in a trust, and then selling bonds on it, securitizing it like anything else. So that again widens spreads in anything outside of that tranche. And there's a million other things, but I won't bore you with that. And anything else? We're good? All right, very good. Thank you, guys. Again, we appreciate everybody's support, and looking forward to hearing from everybody today about Louisiana.